when you're there interacting with children in the hospital and singing with them, they don't see you as a Jew or a Muslim or a Christian. They see you as a human that just wants to bring joy to their life, and that's how really is. There are no barriers. We're all humans, and we're all united with this mission.
Where lust for a whole life and nothing but less makes people jump out of a comfortable pond into an unknown ocean. Welcome to that journey between the East and the West. Who says Rolling Stones don't gather moss? Hello, everyone. I am Meenu Gupta, your host for the day, and I'm delighted to have you join me every week as amazing people share their incredible and inspiring life stories of straddling continents. Thank you. My guest for today is Lika Torikashvili, a young trailblazer who has accomplished a lot at a young age. She established a youth-led non-profit called Paint the World at the age of 15, was the youngest ever United Nations youth representative of Georgia, advising the government of Georgia on youth policy making. She also co-founded an e-learning center in Afghanistan and a dialogue education platform called Peace in Our Schools. So thank you, Lika, for joining me today.
Thank you so much, Meenu, for having me.
I have a lot to ask because you've covered a lot of ground in these very young years that you are in. Your journey started in Georgia, Tbilisi, if I gather. So do share how it started and what motivated you from one step to the next.
Oh, we have to go back 10 years in time. It's been a wonderful journey. I'm really grateful for it. Actually, it's my birthday month, and it's been a time of reflection and a time of really connecting the dots and thinking about how it all happened and why it all happened. And yeah, it starts in Tbilisi, Georgia, in a small town of Tbilisi. I guess it starts with a dream to really see the world. I remember being a little girl and, watching this cartoon, Dora the Explorer, on Nickelodeon. It was about this girl who was going places and seeing the world and different cultures. And I remember watching it as a little Lika, dreaming to be like Dora and to go and explore and meet people. And it was a dream. And for a lot of girls and boys in Georgia, it was really hard at that time to leave the country and travel. And coming from a lower middle class family, I knew it's a dream to, go out in the world and explore it. But I hope that one day that dream will come true, and it did, and I'm really, really grateful. I guess what helped me pursue my dream is education in the first place. I was lucky to receive a United World College scholarship to study in the UK when I was only 16 years old, actually. And that opened the door for many, many, many more possibilities. That's why I believe that education opens doors. And that's why right now I'm in that fight of making education more accessible for women and men around the world. But yeah, it all started with a dream to explore and that intuition that there is a bigger world out there outside of my small town and my small country of Georgia. And then meeting like-minded young people from very different cultures than mine. You mentioned my Jewish background, my best friends and my colleagues, people that I shared incredible journeys with, Aziza, Ramiz, Aisha. I will tell you more about these people and change makers later on. But these three people were all Muslim. I had a Jewish background, and it all started with first getting to know their worlds, their religion, their background, and then realizing that we're all interconnected, that this is a very interconnected world. And then we might have different religions and backgrounds, but we're all one. We all have similar goals. And that kind of broke down those barriers, and that kind of changed the whole worldview that little girl from Georgia had.
Thank you for sharing that. I think we'll have a lot to cover. Something very interesting you mentioned, which is, I'm sure, very inspiring to the young people who would be listening in, having dreams, being intuitively connected, and education. Now, you mentioned that you got a scholarship at the age of 16 from UK. It would help if you share how did that happen?
Definitely. And I encourage listeners who are in high school right now to consider this scholarship. It is a life-changing opportunity indeed. So this is called United World College, UWC, and it's a branches of colleges around the world. The one I got into was in Wales, the UK, and it's in a castle, a 16th century old castle, so a very fascinating place. But their mission is to raise a generation of change makers that will to come together from different backgrounds to share the culture and to build a more sustainable world together. So that's the mission of high school came. And the way I got into this high school is very interesting. So my mom was watching a TV show in Georgia, and she accidentally heard this interview about first ever competition. They were choosing 6 Georgians to go to United World Colleges around the world, and they had one spot in the UK. And she knew that my dream was to go to Hogwarts. Harry Potter was my big it was a big thing for me. And once you learn that this high school is in a castle in the UK, my mom was like, Lika, you have to try this. And at that time, I was very into activism. At that time, I was already a founder of Paint the World movement, which I'll tell you a little bit more in detail later on. So I was really into this idea of diversity, of sharing culture, and the mission of this high school was really close to my own mission. So my mom was suggesting, encouraging to apply. And I'll be honest with you, I thought that I don't have a chance because they would choose only one young person from entire Georgia. So I was very skeptical, but my mom was like pushing me and she really believed in me. So thanks to her one more time, my entire life changed when I applied, got in, and then went to the first country ever, actually. UK was the first country I ever went to see. I was so scared on that plane ride. And now here I am. I've lived in Europe, in Asia, in Africa, in South America, and I truly consider myself a global citizen. But it all started with that one plane ride from Georgia to the UK at the age of 16.
That actually sounds like a lovely dream, a fairy story which happened to you, and it all started with that one application or that voice that your mother heard, no, on the radio. So that's really, really interesting and very nice.
Exactly.
Actually, it's very inspiring because it gives people a lot of hope.
Yes, you have to try.
And tell me a little more about you were just 15 when you established the non-profit Paint the World. So, what is all that about?
Paint the World was actually inspired by my aunt, my lovely aunt Nana, that I love dearly. She has a developmental disability, and growing up with her, seeing how she wasn't integrated in the society the way it could have been or should have been, seeing her, being marginalized because of her disability really affected me growing up. And my entire childhood, I wanted to paint her world. I wanted to see her happy. I wanted to see her smile. And that really inspired to try to do the same with other people who also need to feel loved, connected, cared about. So Paint the World was a movement that united young people with the idea of volunteerism. We would go to hospitals and orphanages within Georgia, and we would share time with the residents. So we would bring music, presents, we would do performances. We would simply be there with the residents to paint their worlds, bring some colors and joy and love. And what started with just a high school project turned into a movement in hundreds and then thousands of Georgian youth joined the movement while I was still in Georgia. And then when I left Georgia, together with my Muslim friend, who is now my best friend actually, from Malaysia, we turned Paint the World into a global movement and brought it to Asia, Africa, Europe, and America together. So a Jew and a Muslim together started painting the world of people who need colors and love and happiness. But it all started with a very small idea to make my aunt happier.
Thank you for sharing that. In order for the people to really grasp exactly how it flourished or how it went from idea to implementation to where it is right now, it would be very helpful because what I gather is one of the main things which must have helped you after the idea stage, after the idea in inspiration stage. I'm assuming one of the main things would have been the digital connections across the world. However, I'm sure it took much more than that. So, just for this particular project, so that other people, other young ones understand, okay, I have a dream, and this could be a potential way to reach out or to take it from step one to step two.
Definitely. So actually being in that international environment in the high school in the UK really helped because we had students from 145 other countries at that high school. And the way it started is, first of all, Aziza, my dear friend from Malaysia, and I connected. She was inspired to bring Paint the World to Malaysia. And we also realized that because she has a Muslim background, I have a Jewish background, we could bring Jewish and Muslim youth together for this movement. So we started talking about the idea in front of our peers in different classes at our high school. We started doing presentations. We started reaching out to different funding opportunities. The way it went is we sat down and we tried to brainstorm what kind of places can we go to, where are people that would benefit from what we had to offer. And we identified hospitals with children who suffered from cancer. We identified orphanages and we identified old folks' homes. Those are places where people need some kindness, some love, some support from peers, from young people. And the way we would share that support and love was through art. So most of the time it was music. We would bring musicians or young people that were good at playing music. We would bring performers, so magicians or dancers. Sometimes we would bring art sessions where we would paint together. Sometimes we would bring dance sessions where we would try and make everyone dance. And ultimately, the goal was to bring good energy, to kind of enter this meditative state where we, the young people that went to that institution and the residents of that institution, would together try to create a space of joy and happiness and love. And we would visit the same institutions for long periods of time. So we would even form friendships with the residents. There are several girls that I'm still in touch with who had cancer, recovered, and then even joined our movement. So now they're painting the world together with us. So there were several very touching stories. The idea was very interesting.
Now I understand more clearly when you say paint the world, that means what you were trying to do was bring color to the lives of people who needed it most at that point in time.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful. Talking about your project, Paint the World. And I was very curious to understand when you began. I believe you must have then begun this project from Georgia. Am I right?
Yes.
So, just as an example, because of course now the project is running in multiple countries with people from different parts of the world, just as an example, in one country, let's say Georgia, how did you go about it? There were school children around the age of 15, 16, I gather. So, how did you go about this project, so to say?
Sure. So, logistically speaking, it was a group of around 10 to 15 high school students. And what we would do is we would sit down and identify places, institutions where we wanted to go and bring joy through art and performances. Usually it was hospitals. There were several cancer clinics for children in our hometown. So we would very often go to those. And sometimes they were orphanages, sometimes they were centers for young people with disabilities. So there were different types of institutions where we would go. And then, depending on the place where we wanted to do the events, we would come up with performances dances. We would contact young dancers in our networks to come with us and do a performance. We would contact magicians, we would contact artists. Sometimes we would even contact local film and movie stars and celebrities that were very loved by the community so that they would come with us and visit the children that we were visiting. So it was very different every time, but usually we would visit the same place several times and try to establish connections with the residents. That was a big part of it. And then slowly the word started to spread that there is this kind of movement called Paint the World, and more young Georgian students got excited to join, and we even started doing it in rural communities in other towns around Georgia. We had hubs in different towns. So it was a very exciting youth movement by the time I received that offer to continue studying in United Kingdom. And to be honest, that was a dream of mine to expand Paint the World, to bring it to more countries. My gut feeling was telling me that this movement was important for people of the world, not only people in Georgia, that there is a need for such initiative in every corner of the world. But that was a gut feeling. I've never even traveled anywhere outside Georgia before that scholarship to the UK. I've never seen other places, only in the movies. I definitely wanted to. I really wanted to see other countries and get to know other cultures. That was all very exciting in theory. But that was a gut feeling that really turned out to be true, because later on we brought Paint the World to Malaysia, Indonesia, Philippines, to several African countries like Kenya, Swaziland, South Africa, Mozambique, Tanzania, even to Panama and several European countries, France, the Netherlands, Belgium, Armenia, Georgia. So it was really global, and we got a lot of support later on. But that was already with my close friend and colleague Aziza, who was a Malaysian friend that I met in that international high school.
Wow, that's actually very nice. What I would like to know, you mentioned that the movement just spread. For example, right, we go back to the beginning in Georgia where it all began, started going to hospitals and after selecting the places. And I really love the fact that you, instead of just doing one-off thing in one place, you all decided to establish a connection, which means continue going there because connection, according to me, is at the bottom of it all. It's about life is about connections. So everything is interconnected in any case. So now, how did the movement spread? Was it word of mouth or you people used social media? How did that happen?
It was a combination of it all, and I'm telling you a story that took place 10 years ago. Now that I'm reflecting on it, wow, I'm getting old, but these all started around 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. So we did have social media back then, but in Georgia, TV was a big part of it too. So there were several shows that invited our team to speak about the movement, to invite more Georgians to join in. There were, documentaries that were made about this back in the days. So I guess that media exposure helped, but also, the word of mouth in terms of young people know each other. And, if you start something in one school, then other schools get to know it and want to do it and want to join. So it was a lot of us bringing in our friends and, friend groups. It became like some sort of a social activity because it was fun, but it was also knowing that you're doing good. So you would feel good as a young person, but also the recipients would feel good because it was all about creating that atmosphere of joy. We would often go with balloons, helium balloons, to create that kind of colorful atmosphere. We would often bring sweets and presents, and we had local companies donating toys for kids that we were visiting, and food and snacks. So it really became like a whole system. And then, as I mentioned, we actually registered this whole movement as an organization in Georgia. We were very young at that time. We were 15, 14-year-olds. So we registered it under my mom's name. And then when we turned 18, we kind of registered it back under our name. But it was initiative by 15, 14-year-olds that wanted to connect. As you said, we were seeking that connection. We were seeking how to find that purpose. I think I personally was looking for purpose at that point in life, and my friends and young people that were doing this together with me, they were also, trying to, at that age, at 14, at 15, you're figuring out life. You are figuring out what the meaning, joy, good and bad, and it helps to feel that you're a part of something bigger than yourself. I guess that was a big motivation behind why we did this. And, it exists today as well. We even, during COVID, Paint the World became digital, and we started video calling residents of hospitals. And that was a whole new phase of this project. We would, do magic tricks on Zoom, and we would make everyone dance on Zoom. And there was so much energy produced on the video calls. It was fascinating to see how we came from, a bunch of high schoolers 10 years ago to using technology today to do similar Paint the World activity, but in a different way.
Question. So all of you went as a bunch of like how many, 10, 15 school children, and you were allowed by the hospitals in the rooms of these children. Was that okay for them?
So it took some negotiations, obviously, and some conversations. It wasn't easy, and that was a big part of this logistical aspect of our work. But we would establish connections. We would explain who we are, and usually there were always rooms for social interaction in this type of hospitals for children. They usually have like a section for residents to play games, to have visitors, to, do homework. And we would usually meet in those sections of the hospital that was specifically for visitors. But once, I recall, this was a very fun activity. We did a flash mob in the hospital. So we had dancers, professional dancers. They were dressed up like doctors. And usually children are afraid of doctors because they associate with painful activities. Usually they take your blood or, do something painful. So we wanted to remove that fear. And we brought dancers that were dressed like doctors. And then all of a sudden music started to play. And this doctor started to dance and give a gift to children. And everyone was shocked for a second. But then everyone started to dance together. And we have a video of it. I'll actually send it to you at some point. It's one of my favorite activities that we did. And then everyone started dancing with the doctors, and that fear of who are these people kind of disappeared. And we all started sharing that moment. It was really beautiful.
That is lovely. But did you have some grown-ups coming with you or try in the interaction with the different institutions and hospitals to help you with the interactions of breaking ice and getting through?
Sure. So my mom was a big part of it, actually, from, helping to register the whole organization to conversations with the grown-ups, but also some of our teachers from the school were really helpful, supporting us to talk to these people. And sometimes, Georgia is a small country and it's easier to do this, but sometimes your family friend is working at that institution, or someone that is there, and that really helps to establish that initial connection. Obviously, that's more of a small country type of way to do it. You can't really do that in the States or Europe, but it worked here, and it helped because once one institution invited you and opened their doors because you knew someone, then others followed, and it somehow, became like a chain reaction. And with more credibility and more media involved in this, somehow that stopped being a big issue. We had connections, we knew people, and it was easy to bring people in. But more than that, they actually enjoyed and benefited from these interactions, the patients, the children. So when the leadership would see that it works, that it's trustworthy, they would actually invite us to come and ask us to come in, because unfortunately, especially at that time, there were not many programs for children, especially in hospitals, to entertain them, to psychologically support them. And even today in Georgia, that's an issue, psychological support and mental health support for patients in such institutions.
I totally understand, particularly in the phase that they would be going through. And actually, in general, even if one is not going through a particular phase, being seen, heard, acknowledged is part of a whole belonging system that all of us as human beings, as social creatures, need to feel part of a connection. Very vital that you mentioned the word connection. And because everybody is seeking that connection in their own individual ways, again it boils down to being seen, heard, acknowledged. That is very important. And you know that you belong to a whole system, to the whole world. Then now you also, in addition to that, was paint the world, and that is, you all are still continuing to do that. But in all the countries, you are also delivering trainings on conflict resolution and interfaith peace building. So, how do you do that? What do you talk about? Can you share an example of maybe a visit where or which left a lasting impression on you?
Yes. So I when I reflect on this journey of a global citizen that I became after I left Georgia 10 years ago, three names pop up in my head. Three people, friends, colleagues that made the biggest impact, I think, on this journey, on my life. And I'm very grateful to these three people. And all three of them are my Muslim friends from Malaysia and Afghanistan. Two of them are girls, women, Aisha from Afghanistan, Aziza from Malaysia, and Ramis from Afghanistan. And there are stories around how I met these people, but why I emphasize their background and why I emphasize our friendship is because growing up in a Jewish family in Georgia, and growing up Jewish in general, you grow up with certain stereotypes and certain mindset. And later on, I learned that growing up Muslim, you also grow up with stereotypes and mindsets. But it's very important to learn something that I learned through this relationships and friendships. You cannot hate someone you know. I heard that at one of our meetings, and that phrase stuck with me. And I think a big part of interfaith dialogue and a big part of peace building is getting to know others and getting to know what sometimes we call the other side. So, all this to say, I grew up not knowing much about Muslims, just knowing that they are the enemy. I hate to say this, but I'm being this is a reflection time, so I'm sharing the honest story. And then going to that high school and meeting Aziza from Malaysia for the first time, we instantly clicked. And that background of me being Jewish and her being Muslim, it became secondary. And after we became very close, and after we decided to join our efforts and bring Paint the World to Malaysia, and after I visited her in Malaysia, celebrated Eid and Ramadan with her family, and then she came to Georgia, celebrated Hanukkah with my Jewish family, we had that conversation, Aziza and I, about her background, about my background. She told me that she grew up with similar stereotypes, knowing that the Jews are the enemy, and I grew up with the same mindset that Muslims are the enemy. And then we talked and we realized that we want to send that message to the world that there is that stereotype or mindset that you are exposed to as a young person, but then you get to choose what you personally believe in. And by getting to know people from different religious, cultural, ethnic backgrounds, and by forming friendships with them, you learn that there is no such thing as the other side. We are all on one side, and we all want peace, and we all want a colorful world. No one wants war, and no one wants suffering. And if there are people that want that, then I feel very sorry for them, because you must be very unhappy yourself to want suffering for someone else. But that friendship with Aziza, that was like a revolution happening in my head, because for the first time I realized that culture can be challenged, and things that you grew up with, once you're exposed to a bigger world and once you open up your soul to getting to know other people, you understand that the world is bigger, and you understand that the love is the answer. And by doing Paint the World together, Aziza and I started bringing that message into our work. We started bringing Jewish and Muslim and Christian students to do Paint the World together with us. We had summer projects in Malaysia and in Georgia, and we would bring international students from all around the world, from different colleges, to volunteer, to participate in this activities. And it was interesting, because what I noticed is that when you're there interacting with children in the hospital and singing with them, they don't see you as a Jew or a Muslim or a Christian. They see you as a human that just wants to bring joy to their life, and that's how it really is. There are no barriers. We're all humans, and we're all united with this mission to make the world more colorful. And that all started with Aziza, and then Paint the World in Malaysia, and then later on when I served my mandate as Georgia's youth delegate to the United Nations, I met other like-minded people that thought similar to me. It was Ramiz Bakhtiar. He was Afghanistan's first youth delegate to the United Nations. We met at the UN, and we started peace education program called Peace in Our Schools. And then it was Aisha Huram from Afghanistan, a peace activist, education activist, and Afghanistan's youth delegate to the United Nations, the last youth delegate of Afghanistan to the United Nations, unfortunately, but hopefully there will be more. And then with Aisha, we started online education platform for Afghan women. And throughout these interactions, it's been a lot of reflections around my identity. And I think one of the difficulties with becoming a global citizen is that you question a lot things that you grew up with, and your family and people around you that grew up with you that did not get that exposure to the world might not understand where you're coming from or why you're questioning things that you're questioning. And that's a challenge, because you don't want to ruin those relationships, because you care about your family and you care about your friends. But at the same time, you understand that those stereotypes and mindset that you grew up with they're no longer relevant to that life of a global citizen, because you understand that people are all united and people are the same. They want the same. They fear the same. and you don't see the world as me and the other. You see the world as us, people, humans. And I even mentioned this at the UN speech. As a youth delegate, you get to speak on behalf of your UN delegation, of your country's UN delegation at the General Assembly. And my speech was all around global citizenship and the importance of global cooperation. And I recalled that moment when Tesla sent their car into space, and on the car, inside the car, on the circuit board, there was written "Made on Earth by Humans," and that was very emotional for me to see that. I somehow connected with that message, that that car that was sent into space was made on Earth by humans. That we're all humans, and we're all the same. We're all similar. We're all connected. So sorry, I this was a very long speech, but I wanted to cover a lot of different topics. Please let me know what I should dive deeper into, whichever one.
And thank you for sharing that. It gives us an understanding of your journey and which were the points that mattered. And yes, that statement which you made about made on earth by humans is a very powerful one. It sounds powerful and it feels powerful. So therefore, I'm sure that's the reason why you connected with that and you feel with that, because when you say that also, even I feel that. So it is a powerful one, and hats off to Tesla for actually putting that out. A very good one. Now, you mentioned the word global citizen several times. What does that word mean to you?
Oh, that word means a lot to me. And I'll try to unpack it. I've been actually thinking about this, especially after reading the description of this on your website, Meenu, and how you view global citizenship. I started reflecting on that as well myself. So what global citizenship means for me, I'll connect the dots. I'll go backwards. So, in my view, in my life, in my story, I guess it worked like this. I switched a lot of high schools. I first went to a Russian high school, and my whole mind, I was thinking in Russian. Then I realized that I need to know Georgian to live in a Georgian community in Georgia. So I switched the school. I was in ninth grade. I went to Georgian school. I started thinking in Georgian. I switched my brain completely to Georgian reality. Then there was high school, that scholarship in the UK. I switched my brain again to learn completely in English. That was all very difficult, but with the switching languages, I realized that you also connect to the culture. So, Russian culture, I know a lot about it. I have deep respect for it. Russian literature, Russian communities. Then there's Georgian communities. And when you learn and speak that language, you communicate with people in that language. You have a deeper connection. And then English. I got to study in the UK and then in the US and then on the ship with semester at sea. I got to study on the ship and travel the world while studying on the ship. And then with Paint the World, I got to spend a year in Africa in Swaziland. And that was completely mind blowing for a girl from a small town in Georgia to be in a small rural village in Swaziland, and I spent a year there. And for the first time in my life, I looked different. I've never experienced that before. And it was a very interesting experience to feel that way, and a very rewarding experience because of the friendships made there. And obviously the background, the religious background, it was growing up in the Jewish community, and then all the learnings that I had being challenged by friendships that developed with my Muslim friends from Malaysia and Afghanistan. So the global citizenship idea in my life, it almost feels like now that I'm connecting those dots, it almost seemed like it was a journey that had to be experienced. in order to understand that we're all interconnected. Because, now that I'm looking back, one thing that I realized is that colors and joy and being seen and being feeling that you connect with someone, that's universal. I felt that in Asia, I felt that in Africa, I felt that in America and Europe. Culture might be different a little bit, but that need for connection and love, that's universal. And we may think that we're all very different. Well, skin color might be different, religion might be different, food might be different. But when we go to the core, deep down, global citizenship means to me that you understand with your whole being that in reality, we all have very similar needs, very similar wants, and we're all very, very similar. And I learned that through this journey of 10 years. And I think I'll keep learning that. I think there's also a cost that you pay for being that global citizen. I think sometimes it can get lonely with that mindset. And I also think that the price that you pay is that your heart is in a lot of different places, and you have pieces of yourself in a lot of different places. And sometimes maybe it's hard to really answer the question, where is home? Because home is everywhere and home is so many different things. So that's my very, I don't know, maybe a big and long answer to what global citizenship is to me, but I'm still I'm still trying to answer that question. I know that the next 10 years will also be learning experience, connecting the dots and learning more about what it really is.
That was a wonderful share. Thank you for sharing that. And yes, sometimes it can be a lonely journey then when you have arrived at a certain level of understanding. In some ways, it is very connecting because you feel the connection everywhere. And in other ways, when other people have not arrived at that point, your awareness takes you through, your tolerance can take you through, but and sometimes it can be lonely because for other people there is the other. So the feeling of usness sometimes may not be reflected by everybody around you. So the feeling or the awareness and understanding at that level, which you at a very young age have had the opportunity to arrive at, may not actually be there for many more people. So sometimes it is because of lack of exposure, and sometimes it is not because of lack of exposure. Sometimes it is lack of tolerance, attitude. So, because a lot of people who call themselves global citizens because they travel everywhere across the world and maybe much older in age may still have their very, let's say, stubborn belief systems. This is who I am, this is what I believe in, and that is right. And the day all that leaves and you are always open and there is this tolerance, the open eye of a wondrous child everywhere you go, with everybody you meet, people you know and people you don't know. When the day that attitude happens, in my opinion, that day you are a global citizen.
Definitely. And not losing that state of open eye, a wondrous child that you mentioned. I think that's a mission for life. And now that I reflect back, that's what I would like to be. That I don't want to lose that, because even in Buddhism that I studied a little bit, isn't that the kind of idea to arrive to that state of a child that looks at the world with love and wonder, and have that mindset towards the world. And I hope not to lose that, because the world really challenges you, I guess, as you grow up and as you become older, it challenges you to lose that. And I think the real wisdom and the real power and strength is if you manage never to lose that child inside of you that, believes and trusts and loves. genuinely loves the world. Curiosity. Yeah.
True, it is definitely true because at times the world will force you to make definitions. Times the world will want you to put lines and boxes around belief systems. But as long as the openness exists, till that time, you are you. And that is, and you are you also means that there is y- us. Me and you doesn't exist, and there is an us then. Now, some of the countries that you traveled through and worked in were also war zones. Is there any incident which you can recount from such a zone that impacted you in some way? And that, dear listeners, was the first part of my conversation with Lika. There is more to come in the next episode. So join me once again. Thank you for listening to the series Between the East and the West. Do subscribe to the channels mentioned on the site in case, of course, you liked what you heard. I am Meenu Gupta, the host of the series, and I'll be looking forward to your comments. We love feedback. Thank you once again. Namaste and bye bye.